Hello. Morning, everybody. So welcome. This session is about power and networking. Well, the subject that was always near and dear to my heart. We have three great panelists, two builders and a tech wizard at the other end of the table. So I'm going to allow these guys to introduce themselves, and I'll introduce the session, and we'll have some fun today. Aaron?
Hi, Aaron Gutin, Savant System, not a tech wizard.
I'm Barry Hensley with North Star Luxury Homes we build in the Dallas area.
I'm Nick Quijano, owner of Southerly Homes. We're in Austin, Texas.
Awesome. Welcome, guys. So we're going to talk about a lot of things today. We're going to start with networking. We're going to start with power, move into networking, and then talk about how we do all these things. So as a builder, what this means to you. In my experience as an integrator, what I found was there were three things that I think most people were concerned with. When you talk about tech products and you think about technology in a home, I want to make sure that things work together, right? That product A can talk to product B, and I'm not happy when they don't work together. As a customer, I want them to work how I want them to work, right? So I don't just want it to work because the integrator told me to push this series of buttons. I want it to work the way that I expected it to. And finally, I just want it to work. If something doesn't work when I push the button, it's a maddening experience, especially if I spent tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on these systems in my home. So the two elements that really make the most difference in that equation are power and networking. They're the foundation of the house. So if there are any builders in the room, you understand how important the foundation of the building that you're building is to the success of the construction project. The same goes for power and networking. Unfortunately, power and networking are probably the least sexy things that we do as integrators. So what happens when you look at building a new home and putting in the coolest, latest, and greatest technologies, you go to an event or a show, and if any of you were at the CEDIA Expo this year, the Integrators National Trade Show, every time you turned around, there was another gigantic 150-inch video wall. That was the sexy new thing, is to have enormous displays on the wall. Everyone there asked how much they cost. Aaron, I think Savant has one that's close to $1 million.
Yeah, the one we had out was $1.2 million.
$1.2 million worth of video display. Which is great until it doesn't turn on because your network isn't responding properly or there's not enough power to the displays that are there. So this is what we're going to talk about today, is the investment you've got to make behind the scenes, behind the walls, in the infrastructure of the home to make sure that you've got a successful implementation of technology in the project. And without that, everything else sort of falls apart. So our job is going to be to talk to you about these products and the way these systems work, and also to explain to you how you can explain this to your customers. And you can make sure that you build a successful project and you're not getting callbacks. I would imagine you've gotten some angry phone calls from clients when the integrator you recommended didn't necessarily follow through, or there was a power or network issue and the stuff they spent all the money on wasn't working. We're going to help you try and avoid that today. All right, Aaron,
Awesome.
You're up.
We're living in a really interesting sort of transitional time, all of us. The electrical grid that we've built over the last 100 years here in the States and elsewhere is strained. We're obviously using a lot more energy in our homes and in our lives. And that's contrasted with all of the climate change issues going on. And over the last many years, thank you, we have been working on a complete power automation solution. We're automation nerds. About 15 years ago, our founder built a new home on Cape Cod. He put 45 kilowatts of solar on the property. There's 2 structures and a boathouse, and then was really pissed off when the grid went down and he had no power, and didn't understand that, at the time, if you just had solar and the grid went down, you couldn't use your solar panels. There was no way to turn them on. And so this sent our inventor leader on a mission. 15 years later, we are big believers in this simple statement. We think smart homes start with smart power, period, full stop, end of story. Maybe you'll agree by the end of this, maybe you won't. But we've really tried to take our massive automation system platform and then integrate a complete smart energy solution right into the same app you use for Apple TV or you're watching a movie or TV, and then tie in some of the creature comforts that our customers expect, automating power, using the battery in the house to offset your peak kilowatt hours so you're not spending as much money buying power from the grid, but you're leveraging power that you basically captured from the sun for free after you pay for the solar panels and the battery. And there's some key drivers of all consumers currently in this space. Some of them just want to know how much energy they're using. They're conscious of this, and it's a part of their everyday. Some are really, green. Green soldiers, they just want to be as green as possible. And so to them, this investment is worth it. And then, of course, there's mostly security is what we hear. I want my home to work when power is out. I want the fridge to work. I want my kids to be safe. I want the security system to work, et cetera, et cetera. And so our solution, like others that take on this category, is really designed to create resiliency in the home, ensure that that house continues to work even if the grid goes offline. And then we want to use technology to stretch the lifespan of that battery. And we do that by making the electrical panel itself smart. It's important to note that last year, Congress and Senate passed a big, huge climate bill called the Inflation Reduction Act. Like all bills that go through the government, this is a bunch of different programs written by different senators and different representatives that all get folded into a large bill. There are many, many incentives, for the end user to invest in this technology. You can see that if you put battery or solar or both, or make our power modules that make the electrical panel smart, there's a 30% rebate the customer's gonna get back from Uncle Sam on that investment. So 30 grand back on 100 grand, easy math this morning because we probably haven't had enough coffee. Customers like this a lot, especially if you got a customer building a house, they're gonna have a pretty significant tax liability at the end of the year. This is a coupon you get off the total bill at the end of the year from Uncle Sam. There are other programs for multi-dwelling units and other types of structures, but for this crowd, it is important that you understand this so that you can bring it up to a customer considering this. It's still sort of making its way around to consumers everywhere.
Aaron, before we dive into solutions, you guys have had some experience with power, right? I want to involve the builders in the conversation.
Sure, of course.
Have you had any bad experiences with power? Have you had any situations where this has become an issue, whether it be technology related or not?
The only one that I've run into, and it's just a little bit of follow-up on what you said about the tax rebate, is that it's a tax credit.
Sure.
So if you don't owe that much tax, you're not going to get all that back.
Sure.
So I don't want to mislead a customer and tell them, hey, you put $50,000 worth of solar on, you're going to get $15,000 check from the government. Only if you've paid that much in taxes will you get it. But the power that we put in, and of course, everybody remembers Ice-Mageddon back in February of 2021 when every county in Texas was below freezing for the first time in history. And backup generator sales were skyrocketed, just through the roof. So almost every home we've got now, we're putting a backup generator in. And they're flawless. We've had no problem with them at all. I offer solar and battery to all my customers. Some of them accept it. Most of them want me to pre-wire for it, but definitely the backup generator. And we haven't had any issues with it.
Any experience on your part?
Yeah, we see the same thing. I mean, you called it Ice-Mageddon, we call it Snowmageddon. But in Austin, we had customers who didn't have water for, I think we went on 10, 11 days.
Wow.
On the water side, and then we had Austin Energy kind of went in and out depending on what part of the grid you were on. So it was completely unreliable. And in some of the surrounding areas that we build, I know I have a property out in kind of the Llano area, and that went 9 full days with no power. So, then everybody's pipes burst. I mean, we had, some pretty catastrophic damage out there. So I feel like we get the request to, let's eliminate Snowmageddon. It's something that we hear all the time. And what is the solution? Is it battery backup? Is it just solar? We have a client right now that said, I want whatever you learn at the builder conference, I want all of it. Put it all in. He's like, I want the generator, I want the battery backup, I want to be able to flip a switch, and he's like, I never want to experience that again. So that's the solutions we're looking for our clients.
Yeah, that week of snow or Ice-Mageddon, we were getting calls, just, dudes were like, I have my credit card, when can you be here? We thought if we had a stand-up Savant shop, we could have killed it that month. Everyone was really interested in it. It's not surprising that a customer experiences that. Just like 2020 or 2021, none of us had experienced that sort of agoraphobia before being stuck inside, and all of us now think differently about how we live and what we keep in the house. It's very similar if you experience something like that. So, and I'm seeing a lot of generator plus, or the generator is the backup to the battery. but it's still there in case, it's a bad day, battery depletes, you still have that generator as a backup. It's not surprising that Texas is going to be a big participant there in that category. What's weird about generators is that only 5% of American homes actually have a generator, even though probably everyone in this room feels like every house you go to has one. It's still a very small percentage of the overall inventory out there. So we still have a big opportunity, obviously, to communicate the needs for this and sell it, obviously, to more and more homeowners. On the battery front, there's a bunch of different technologies, so customers are still doing a bunch of different research and trying to figure out what's right for them. But mostly, I think it's about sizing the backup solution to the house and the customer, right? So if you have a 30,000 square foot house, your needs are going to be very, very different than your average 2,500 square foot custom, semi-custom split level. Is a very different energy footprint than a larger luxury residence for sure. And as that house gets bigger, it gets more complicated and more expensive to obviously attend to the backup needs, even though those are the customers that are eager for it and are paying for it. So all of us still have some work to do to trickle that down into the upper middle class.
Nice. Yeah, keep on going. We have a solution in front of us, it looks like.
Awesome. So, these solutions, whether it's ours or anyone else's, they're really going to be built with these sort of three key building blocks. The electrical panel itself, it's important that we have control over that at a granular level, circuit by circuit. And that's because when the power goes out and we're using that battery, we want to be able to reduce the amount of energy we're asking that battery for. And so we can basically, as that battery depletes, turn off more and more items in the electrical panel itself so that we're not asking the battery to back up 400 amp service all the time, because you'll eat through that battery really quickly. As you see, our battery and the inverter on top of that battery are really narrow, really close to the wall, about 12.2 inches wide. So we're really trying to make sure we can fit this into a garage or into a tight space. And then lastly, of course, electrification. There's more and more and more electric cars being purchased. I just heard on NPR last week that 25% of the cars sold in California this year so far are electric vehicles. And that's the first time it's really hit that mark. They're still being purchased by affluent customers who can afford the upfront ticket. But sooner or later, that technology starts trickling down. And we have got an awesome level 2 EV charger. It's part of that ecosystem. So if you're not including a 240 volt outlet in the garage for each car, it's a good idea to start at least considering that as part of your build, so that the customer who does end up buying an electric car after they get over buying and building a new house has a place to plug that EV charger in.
So Aaron, you've got all these things working together, right? You've got batteries, you've got EV chargers, you've got generators, you've got solar panels, you've got windmills, you've got all the stuff in the house. Can you kind of roll through how this works together?
Yeah, so what we do is we tie all this together in our app. And so what we've done is take our experience with user interface, and we've just made it easy for someone to use. Others are doing this. You don't only have to obviously come our way, but the point is that, mom and dad should be able to easily figure out what's eating the most energy right now. What is my top consumers of the day? Did we have a power outage yesterday? We want to alert that customer if there's an issue. And then of course, weather events, right? So, in theory, a customer who was living with a platform like this during snow or ice-mageddon might have gotten that alert, 48 hours before, which would have triggered our system to kick into what we call storm watch mode, which is just going to prioritize charging that battery as quickly as possible to 100%, even if we got to use grid power to do that. And then we hold that charge at 100% for 72 hours, waiting for that event so that we're prepared. And so it's really all about automation, making it easy to use, bringing some backside intelligence to the platform so that it just becomes something that works in the house, just like air conditioning. Most of us don't touch our thermostat every day, right? It's like the weird odd day or the cool day where we're off our schedule, where we're adjusting that. And that's sort of the thought process here.
So to the builders up here, is that something that is a must-have for your customers, you think, or is that just a nice-to-have?
So I look at this as falling into one of three categories. And you can analyze this by cost. I've got customers who look at it and say, how much is it going to cost me? Is it worth it? They do a calculation in their mind, do cost-benefit analysis. And then convenience, which you've got a customer who falls into that category because they don't care about the cost. So they put the cost way down there at the bottom. They just want it to work. And then necessity. You got somebody who's doing business overseas. Maybe they're a foreign currency trader and they're working at 3 a.m. They can't afford for the power to be out more than 15 seconds. So that's necessity. So it falls into those categories. So, when I talk to a customer, the first thing that comes to their mind is cost. And then if they've been through something like his customer's talking about, then they've already decided, I don't care what it costs, I want it. So most of them I can convince to do the backup generator pretty easily. Most of them actually have it in their mind that they want a backup generator. And when I start talking about solar, I can sell solar all day long. It's an easy thing to sell. And whether my customers buy it or not, it's up to them, but it's not a financial decision at that point because I can show them that the money makes sense. Battery backup's another story. Battery storage costs about $1,000 a kilowatt and doesn't generate electricity, it just stores it. Solar costs $2,500 a kilowatt, which is a whole lot more expensive, but it creates energy. You did see that slide from Tim yesterday where there's Tesla Powerwall owners that are making $150 a day. That's kind of like arbitrage for electricity. They're filling their batteries up with 4 cents a kilowatt of electricity and selling it for 30 cents a kilowatt during the day. It's pretty smart. And Elon Musk is a smart guy to make that happen. Most of my customers don't fall into that category. They're not going to buy it for that reason.
No. Nick, what do you think?
I mean, very similar, and I wish all of our customers were like the ones who say price tag doesn't matter, but that's not the reality of the world that we live in. So I think a lot of it is the cost basis and educating the customer on what's the best value for them. How are they going to live in the home? Not just now, but how are they going to live in it and use it 5 years, 7 years down the road? How does their family grow and their energy usage grow? I think that there's an idea, at least from the consumer market, that we hear this a lot, that everybody says battery storage it's not there yet, right? The batteries are still too big. We don't know how many choices we have. The first word out of everyone's mouth is, oh, Tesla Powerwall. At least from our customers, and that's what we hear a lot, in the field. So we want to educate ourselves better, and it's nice to see a little bit more competition, I think, in the market and more options. But
For sure. Tesla certainly has the brand cachet and awareness. It always comes up for sure. And there's some differences. We back up the entire service to the house. Tesla, for example, takes a sort of partial backup approach. You do about 200 amps at a time with their platform. So the downside of that, it's more affordable. It's a smaller battery. It's easier to tuck in the house. But you're starting the conversation with half your shit isn't going to work. And I don't think that customers like starting there. They want to get there, but often they're not aware of this in the beginning as well. So anything that gets customers buying this is great, because the more of us that are living with this in our homes, the more resilient the grid is, and we're all going to be better off for it. So go Tesla, I guess.
Yeah. So, Aaron, we have to move on to networks in just a second. But before we do, I just want you, this is what I wanted to have you show. A generator is really an insurance policy, right? You only use it when the power's out. I think this is the next evolution of power generation and storage, which is how do I use this and make it more effective than just an outage issue?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The generator waits for a moment of need and then kicks into action. Everybody's happy to have it in that moment. But a battery backup solution, or tied into solar or some sort of energy generation solution, can be utilized every day, especially the battery. You want to deplete that battery 75% every day and then recharge that battery so that the battery is healthy. And so what you see here is this is a breakdown of how we've taken everything a customer might need to know about power energy in their home and divvied it up inside our user interface. And so the dashboard's going to gather all of what we call our power widgets here, all the bits and bobbles about what's happening. The load control center gives our customer the ability to turn on or off any individual circuit. So, ground your kid, don't give them access to the service in the app, and turn off power to the Xbox. You're going to have a very angry 16-year-old on your hands. Load history, we can go out all the way to a year and look at any 6 loads in the house. So if mom or dad are curious about why a bill is abnormally high, they can go back that year and see if there's an analog month or what might have been happening. And then, of course, modes and scenes we've hit on. Stormwatch is a mode that's tied to what we call an energy scene. So we're telling the system, hey, when this event happens, this is what we want you to turn on, and these are the things we want you to turn off. So think of it as a virtual electrical panel that we are cascading through as the battery depletes. The best part about this is that I've definitely sat down with customers and spent 10 minutes, and they're going around themselves. 20 minutes later, they're almost an advanced user. And so, it is, we've done a good job, I think, of laying it out in a way where the average person who doesn't know the difference between kilowatt hours can really understand how to use it.
Awesome. So moving on to networks, because we're a little bit limited on time here. If a generator is to your solution or the solution you just described, as say like an Eero access point is to a more sophisticated managed network, can you, I guess, maybe define the difference between the off-the-shelf Best Buy product and what you're about to be talking about, what a real network looks like?
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than any other category. When you're looking at a Cisco or a true enterprise-grade product, they're buying better hardware, they're using better plastic, you're getting a better power supply, and typically you're getting a more sophisticated software platform that's designed to handle all kinds of different corporate network topologies, security environments, et cetera. Mostly what you're getting is a product that's designed to support the kind of environment we create in an automated home, which is, very akin to a mid-size enterprise. So lots of devices in the house, tons of Wi-Fi, tons of hardwired devices. All these things expect 24-hour-a-day access to that network, as does our customer. If they come home at 2 o'clock in the morning and they're pressing a button and it's not working, they're probably upset. And so, what we're seeing happening in the enterprise space over the last decade is an adoption of new technologies, AI, machine learning, mutual information algorithms that are all playing a role in actually creating network environments that troubleshoot themselves, or at least take accurate records of everything that's happening, and so that they can use that data to improve Wi-Fi tomorrow, make Wi-Fi better tomorrow than it was today by comparing today's experience for all the Wi-Fi devices to the last 30 days, and then making a smarter decision about channel selection and radio output and stuff like that, so that we can have a better overall experience walking through the house. And then for builders or integrators, what we want to be able to solve a problem quickly. Typically with a network, you've got to spend a lot of time diving into the data, what was happening while I was away. And that requires traditionally being on site, getting into the gear, pulling out logging information, and then doing a collegiate sort of exercise of looking for the pebbles that are going to tell us the story of why dad had a bad Zoom call or mom had a bad experience. The platforms that we've been seeing, both from Cisco, Juniper, et cetera, are all using new software to actually avoid that entirely and reduce the amount of support calls, reduce the amount of interaction that we need to have after we've deployed a solution.
So, Nick, Barry, are your clients asking about networks at all? Are they leaving it to the cable providers to hook it up and walk away? How deep into this conversation are you guys getting?
So I don't know what Austin's like, but in the Dallas area, we only have one carrier to choose from. So we don't have a lot of choice when it comes, who we're going to buy our connectivity from. But once it gets to the house, we have a lot of choices. And obviously, we're not going to stop at the carrier's modem and say that's good enough. We're going to put a robust router behind that. And we typically put it at wireless access point about 1 per 1,000 square feet. And we cover the outdoor living area, the garage, the driveway, cover all of that. When you put your Tesla in the driveway, it's going to connect to your network before you even get in the garage.
Yeah.
And that's important. And we put the charging stations in and all that stuff. We put 60 amp 220 in because I've got a customer. I got a customer with a G60 all electric Genesis G60. He plugs into a 120 volt outlet, and overnight he gets 20% charge.
Wow.
He plugs into a 60 amp 220, and in an hour and a half he's got a full charge.
Absolutely.
So you got to give him enough power.
So your network solution, did that come from a bad experience and you realized you had to upgrade your process?
It didn't, but we all hear that. You'll probably hear the same thing. You'll probably say the same thing. We probably heard you shouldn't go wireless when you have an opportunity to be wired, because wired is so much more robust. I can tell you that in the last several years, wireless has gotten very robust. Mm-hmm. And so when we put the wireless access points all over the house, you get 5 bars, the equivalent, 5 bars coverage anywhere that you go. And it's very robust. It rarely fails. I don't have very many customers asking me how to do that. They just want good network connectivity. So I just leave it up to my integrator to do the right thing. And his rule of thumb is 1 access point per 1,000 square feet.
So Nick, are you just trusting the smart guys with this stuff, or do you have a plan for your customers?
I love surrounding myself with people smarter than me. It's pretty easy to do. So, so we've got different choices in Austin. We got Google Fiber is probably one of the fastest options out there, but it kind of depends on where the neighborhood is. And so, especially if we're doing a rebuild or a large addition, that's one of the first questions we have to ask: is is Google Fiber available here? Is it AT&T, or are we out in the country and we're on dial-up or satellite? What are we using? And then it's matching up with the correct integrator and looking at, does this make the most sense? I agree with you, and I agree probably with what most integrators will say is, let's run the wire. Let's not make everything wireless. I feel like the consumer market still says, just give me a couple drops, put in a few wireless access points, we'll be good, we'll figure it out later. And so for us, it's coaching them beyond that. I mean, running Cat 7 drops is not that it's not that expensive. So our integrator has helped coach us up to move beyond Cat 6, and so we're putting Cat 7 in most everything that we're doing, and we're getting it at a pretty good price. And so now we're coaching our clients and letting them know, hey, we're trying to future-proof you. When Google 5.0 comes out, we're trying to be ready. We do the same thing with the WAPs. We try to put those in every 800 to 1,000 square feet or so that we're ready to go. But that's kind of how we're preparing.
Nice. So we're taking this to the next level now, right, Aaron? So we just talked about internet connectivity and how fast your phone can access a website and how reliable your email is. There's a lot more to a network than that, and I think this is where we're going, right?
Yeah, so, AI, for this conversation, we're going to talk about AI as actionable information, right? And that's really the difference between this, newer networks and older networks is that, utilizing these software tools, we can augment, a beginner IT professional or integrator's capability and turn them into an intermediate, or turn an intermediate into an advanced, really just with the right tool set. And that's because generally when anything goes wrong, you got to answer 3 questions for a customer before you can even get to resolving, an issue. And they're all right here. If Sudhir Mata from Juniper were here, he would tell us there's only 2 kinds of network help desk tickets: Wi-Fi sucks, and why does Wi-Fi suck? And you've got to be able to answer both those questions pretty quickly, or the customer thinks you suck. And so, we partnered with a company called Juniper Wireless, or Juniper Networks. They're a 20-year-old enterprise-grade IT provider, but they have a Wi-Fi platform that has been really transforming the enterprise for the last 9 years. This is the same platform you see in every Amazon distribution center or UPS distribution center, way bigger environments than we normally deal with. And what it's doing for our dealer is it is providing actionable information really, really, really quickly. And so things like a house manager calling and saying, hey, the network in the house is awesome, but when I went outside, my thing was connected to Wi-Fi, but I couldn't get anywhere. I couldn't do anything. That used to be a truck roll and a sort of deeper investigation, but this platform told us, hey, 5 ports are missing a VLAN tag, and they happen to be 5 ports with outdoor APs on it, and the VLAN that was missing happened to be the house VLAN, and so all of a sudden, you got someone who basically is stuck in a hole, can't go anywhere because the access points don't have access to what they need. That was a 30-second support call, and a dealer knew exactly what they needed to do, and 10 minutes later, the backyard's fine, house manager's happy, no truck roll. All of that was basically delivered because the network itself is actually catching this stuff, understanding it, recording it, and then leaving it behind for a human to do something with or to act on. We're about 2 years into selling this into the field, both during a early part of the early access program and then an official launch. And it's really, I would say it's one of the fastest growing areas of our business from an adoption perspective. Is, a lot of people who are using older platforms are seeing the benefit of these enhanced tools for sure.
Yeah. So great. So it's a speed-related service issue. So that's a big help. So what's the next evolution? What do we do with it next? Now that we've got a robust network, where do we go?
So, obviously, once we have a robust network, we can put stuff on it, like an automation system and all the other things we need in our house. I think the network's going to continue to evolve. It's going to intertwine with things like power and television. We're all experiencing this. The traditional cable experience has been fractured. We've got, I'm paying for DirecTV and, an embarrassing number of services. And I think what's going to happen is the network itself is going to start to become more of a diving board almost. Where you get into or from where you get into other experiences. So whether it's TV or it is food delivery or any number of things, we're kind of hooked on the network thing. It's making life a lot easier. We make less phone calls than we ever have. Less humans are required to do things. So, to me, the introduction of an AI with a conversational assistant that you can ask, hey, is the network good today? And get a verified answer. To me, that means we need less humans managing projects after we deploy. We need less of the customer's time for support calls afterwards, et cetera. So, I don't know exactly what's next, but I think, all is possible with the right network.
And that's a really good point, because one of the things that I learned in my career is that it wasn't an outage that was necessarily the bad thing. If the power's out, the power's out. Everyone knows what happened. It's when the power's not performing as it should or the network's not performing as it should, when it's sort of kind of working, but sort of kind of not, right?
100%.
So this is how you find out.
Correct. Yeah. Whereas you used to take, 30, 40 humans, one person could typically understand what's happening pretty darn quickly.
Great. So the next section of this actually flows pretty easily, and it's going to come right back on you guys. So we talked about at the beginning, this stuff's not inexpensive, right? A Savant power solution is not inexpensive. A Juniper network is not inexpensive. This is world-class stuff. So how do we decide to use this? How do we decide, what it's worth? How do we arrive at a number with that client that they're willing to pay for something like this? And at what point do you insist they do something better than off-the-shelf Best Buy stuff or off-the-shelf cable company stuff? Because you don't want the headaches and you don't want the responsibility of knowing they're not going to be happy with the service you provided because you didn't make good recommendations.
Go ahead. You have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean it's quite literally the $1 million question. I mean it's tough. I think in my opinion, it starts with education, which is what we're doing here today and we're doing this week, is making sure that all the builders, the architects, and the integrators know just enough to be dangerous with this, right? I mean, as you're going into the conversation of Juniper here, I'm like, okay, that's it's too many details for me, right? Like I'm gonna 100% put my foot in my mouth in front of a customer with that. So I think it's making sure we have the knowledge and some of the basic data to be able to kind of pass on to our teams and pass on to our customers to help. I mean, it's a value equation to help build that value for them and then have them request this.
For sure.
I embarrass the heck out of them. And I tell them, you're building a $2 million house, you don't want to spend $25,000 on a robust network. I think it's called guerrilla sales or whatever the tactic is. I do know that after this panel, I'm going to go back and look up the recorded version of this and use Google Translate to find out what he just said a few minutes ago, way over my head. I'm glad there's people like him that can manage this stuff. And when my systems integrator comes out to, I had a meeting just 2 weeks ago with one of my customers and my integrator was there. And he got there a little early, I got there a little early, the customer wasn't there yet. And he asked me, he said, is there anything you don't want me to cover or do want me to cover? And I said, no, I'm just here to translate. And he says, what do you mean? And I said, because you're up here and my customer's down here and I'm in the middle, I'm going to translate. So somebody has to do that. But I rely on him to explain the differences, to tell people, why you don't want to use the $79 modem that the carrier is going to give you and why that their business is important. Their household business is important to them, being able to have access to the kids' school programs, online and all that stuff. They want that stuff to be there when they expect it. And there are Tesla pulls in the driveway and they want it to be connected so they can get the maintenance updates and all that. So I simply tell them that for their lifestyle, they're going to want something more than just what the carrier gives them. And they usually don't argue.
So as a builder, part of your process is you're going to give your customer allowances for various items in the house, for granite countertops, for fancy bathrooms, for roofing, siding, concrete, everything else they're going to buy. At this point in time, and you can tell me if you're going to change this after this session, what do you put in for network and power as an allowance? Anything? Is there anything in your discussions with your clients that touch on price?
So I actually do. I start with $1 a square foot for wiring.
Nice.
And $5 a square foot for network and power.
Okay.
And it's usually not enough. The wiring is, but the $5 is usually not enough.
I mean, that's pretty progressive from what I've seen to have that included, so that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do the same thing. We start a little bit higher, start at about $1.50 for wiring, and really chunk it into two categories. It's the pre-wire allowance, which is, it's going to get your network, it's going to get your wireless access points, a couple speaker pre-wires, security pre-wires, stuff like that. We know we can cover the home. We know we can cover the home pretty close to budget on that. And then we just all caps, green letters, when we get to the trim out part of the budget, this is just allowance. And it doesn't really matter if we put 10,000 or 20,000, whatever we put, they're gonna go over it when they get in that candy store. So that's what we've done, is really separate those out too, and then coach them up and try to figure out, do they want this entire system to be working? They want all the TVs installed and everything when they move in? Because we have some clients, especially in the Austin area, we're a big IT market, that say, no, we want to handle all that with our integrator afterwards. So we try to just separate those two buckets.
So I'm going to say they're pretty online or on point here. So what I recommend is $1 a square foot for Wi-Fi as a general budget, and that's going to give you a big range. You can go all the way down to like a Ubiquity for $200, or you can support something like a Ruckus, a Juniper, et cetera, and then $100 an Ethernet port. And so if you average 48 ports to start plus your $1 a square foot, you're in a decent ballpark there. Now, the good thing is you'll know right away the customer's like, oh, what? Because then you get to have your conversation. And I'd say something very similar, like this is the foundation of your digital life. Mm-hmm. You're gonna use this every moment of the day. It's just as important as electric. We gotta do something that is equal to the space. What's the first thing you do, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, when you show up at the office and your desktop isn't working and you can't actually work? Who do you call? Oh, I call the IT department. Are you happy about that? Like, no. Well, there's no difference here, right? You need the same 100% uptime here as you do at work.
So I don't know if you guys run into this, but as a builder, if you're in a competitive bid situation, and your competitors are leaving network and power and technology allowances out of their bids, does that impact your ability to win a job?
It can. But technology is just one of those line items too, right? Yeah. So then I keep using the word coaching, but it's going back to coaching the client on, hey, before we finish this conversation, let's really talk through. Because I encourage you to go shop other builders. This is going to be a marriage for the next 12 to 18 months. But let's make sure that we're all, it's apples to apples, right? So we're all coming to the dance and knowing what the other's doing.
I don't get that question up front.
Okay.
I still get the stupid questions like, what's your price per square foot for a 4-bedroom house? Uh-huh. And I say, what's your price for knee replacement surgery? And I try to get them to understand that there isn't a one size that fits all. This discussion about power and networking usually comes up after I've won the job. So I've never lost a job over this topic. Matter of fact, I've never even competed over this topic with another builder.
So is the inverse true, that because you're progressive enough to bring up these topics, not just power and networking, but since that's what we're talking about now, does that make you a more attractive candidate because you have an understanding of these things and their importance in the construction process?
I think it goes a long way towards building trust and credibility. Absolutely.
Cool. Aaron, what are your thoughts on how can I describe this? If you're looking at a system in totality, right? When an integrator hands over a proposal to a client, it might be $300,000 worth of stuff. Power and networking might be 10 to 20% of that total. How does that conversation go when they say, well, I'm comfortable with 250, but 300 is all right. So let's take this network stuff out. And maybe we don't need the power conditioning. Maybe we don't need the battery backup. How do you turn that conversation around to make sure that they understand the importance?
Yeah, I take this fine gentleman's approach.
Yeah.
I shame them a little bit. Like, I can't. It's like taking the tires off the car so you can afford the S-Series Mercedes. Like you can't put bicycle tires on this, this car. You gotta pull back the TVs. Let's pull back some of the edge stuff, and do less rooms, but let's make sure the foundation is in, because, the network touches every single area of the house. In your projects, you're smart enough to cover the outside areas and the garage and the front yard. Without that, nothing's going to work. And so usually it's a coaching moment of like, slow your roll. Like, we could go down on a TV. Maybe we do a couple less rooms of this or that. Because ultimately that $50,000 today that they pull out of the bid, I remind them, is going to cost them 75-ish later, because you've got all the labor now, you got all the people now, you got all the attention now. Later you're going to come back, you're going to cut walls, you're going to patch walls, you're going to be doing all kinds of surgery that is unnecessary, and usually that shakes them a little loose, and they realize that they're being penny wise and pound foolish.
So I think we might have skipped over the slide, or maybe we didn't. Maybe it wasn't in the slide deck. But we're talking about cost again, so I'm just kind of curious. You have a Savant power solution that's a bit unique based on what you've had in the past.
Yeah. Each of our battery units that you see there has a 100 amp inverter on the top. That inverter gives us 12.5 kilowatts out when you're off grid. And so that's why you see the number 2 there or the number 4 there. We're going to match our solution to the incoming service. So if it's a 400 amp service, you're going to have 4 of our inverters. You may not need to load 20 kilowatts of storage into each of those storage units. You may only have 40 kilowatts. So 2 of them are empty, although they're holding a position for the inverter. But you can see these scale in price and can be, the cost of a nice car. So it is a conversation you gotta sort of walk a customer through slowly. On the ROI side, there's a way to show the customer here that because you're gonna use this battery every day, and because we're able to utilize that battery when you're paying higher per kilowatt rates, we're going to lower your bill. That money goes towards your quicker ROI, et cetera. But a 400 amp service can range anywhere from that $43,000 to $65,000 just for all the parts before the solar, right? So that's where the incentives come in, and we're still obviously selling this to an affluent customer. It's not quite made its way all the way to the average, single family home yet.
Nice. What do you guys think about the cost?
Well, so I had I guess a quick question, and maybe it'll help the group, Aaron. So going back to we're trying to win the job, right? So if we add line items in to say, okay, we're going to budget $43,000 for your battery storage, and then we've got load distribution on top of that, and then an EV charger on top of that, that might scare them away right from the beginning. We're trying to win the project. What are some things that we can do as builders to maybe include in our core package to ensure that we're wiring up, we're pre-wiring for these things? And so, just speaking from my experience, we put some span panels in a recent home, and learned a lot going through it. I mean, our integrator learned. He was like, "This is the first time I've done this. This is awesome." So we learned a lot, but there were a couple things we missed, like he didn't run a network cable to it on the first run, right? So that was a callback. So just some basic things that maybe we could include kind of in our core packages to help prepare so that we can then help upsell this kind of stuff.
I love this question. So the easiest thing you can do is make that electrical panel smart. It's in our world, it's half the cost of span, about $3,000 for a 200 amp service panel. Double that for 400 because you've got usually about 70% more loads. Those end up being on average for a 20 amp breaker, $60 at MSRP per breaker. So it's a very affordable line item. In fact, you probably could spread that out and give them a per square foot cost or something like that to make it not as impactful. But simply by making that electrical panel smart, one, the customer is going to get information so they know what their consumption habits are. And 2, you're prepared for anything else after that. Assuming you're pre-wiring for solar and you've got, a run down to the garage and stuff like that, the Prius effect will kick in. Does everybody remember the Prius effect study where they studied drivers who lived with a Prius for 5 years? And those drivers ended up driving slower, not because they were trying to be safer, but because they were staring at the battery. And they started to learn new driving habits that did not impact the battery in the car as much as when we would just, floor it at a light with gas. And so it's very similar. What we see is as customers learn about what they're doing, the kilowatt draw and what that translates into monthly bill, all of a sudden they start understanding a bit more of the value of a real-time backup or an integrated battery. So to me, if every builder in this room decided they were just gonna make electrical panels smart in all of their new homes, we'd all be doing a better thing for ourselves, our business, our customers, and the planet. And I firmly believe that if you expose the customer to that data, 90% of the time they step up and do the right thing. They start understanding that they could do a better thing for themselves and the family.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. We've got Aaron rolling into a Savant sponsor presentation. Thank you for sponsoring the session.
You're welcome. I won't spend too much time. So, our company has been around for 18 years. We're one of the leaders in the automation space. In 2020, we acquired a little company called GE Lighting, which has been a really fun adventure. It was certainly fun to call my dad and tell him that. And as a result, we've got a full automation system platform, starting with really over-the-counter, pick it up at Lowe's, smart bulbs and strips, replacement full-color LED fixtures for the ceiling that are priced like a Halo type fixture that all work with an app, all the way up to our more premium solution where we're doing things like AI-driven networking and power solutions, et cetera. We're sold nationally and internationally. We have a whole network of authorized integrators. Sean used to be one of them. Internally, we've got a full pro services team. We can design all of these power systems for our integrators all the way through interconnection coordination and stamp plans. Our focus this next couple of years is really on resiliency. We're going to be very focused on power and networking, and those categories driving the rest of our experience. If anybody here is interested in learning more, find me. I'm not hard to miss. This is not our first time sponsoring this event. We find it to be very beneficial. So I'm here to talk to you about anything related to this category, whether it's a Savant thing or not. Thank you very much.
I think we just nailed it around the head time-wise. So thanks, everyone. If you have questions beyond this, I'm sure we'll have a cocktail in our hands somewhere later on today. So thanks, Savant, for sponsoring.